Everything we're going to be reviewing today is on the course site. If you click on the Major Assignments folder, you'll see a list of the major assignments in the course. And if you open the Interview with the School Counselor, the top link, the top folder, you'll see all the material you need to complete the assignment. This is what it looks like inside that folder. At the very top, you'll see the instructions and the rubric that we'll be covering in this video. And you'll see the links to submit both the draft and the final paper. Please note that these are separate links. As I said, this assignment is worth a total of 20% of your grade. It's divided into two parts. Part 1 is due October 25th, and it's worth 16% of your grade. Part 2 is due November 1st, and it's worth 4% of your grade. You're going to conduct a 30-minute interview with either a school psychologist or a school counselor. And the purpose of this is to understand how these people work with students and families, and understand some of the issues that adolescents deal with and how counselors or school psychologists support them. You can conduct this interview in person, over Zoom, or by telephone. However, it's important to think about who you're selecting. You may not use a classroom teacher for this activity because you won't get the same types of responses. You may use either a school psychologist or a guidance counselor or some other type of counselor. Make sure that they work with adolescent and not elementary students to match your area of certification. If you're in doubt about whether you can use an individual for this interview, email me at nhalbrenner@mercy.edu. In your paper, you're going to describe certain issues, but first you're going to describe the contents text, the date and time of your interview, the school you went to and the grade levels that the counselor serves, the name and the title of the interviewee, their credentials, so what licenses and degrees they hold, and where the interview took place. You should take notes and ask questions about the following topics. Students. How does this person work with specific students in terms of assessment, behavior management, learning issues, social skills? What specifically do they do with the students? How do they work with families? How do they communicate with families? What issues related to adolescent development have they dealt with? So for example, alcoholism, drugs, bullying, depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, and more. How have they dealt with these issues? What would they want you to know about adolescence as a beginning teacher? How do they work together with other people in the school? What would the role of a school psychologist or counselor be in working with teachers? And a reflection and conclusion. A reflection is different than a conclusion, and you need both. A reflection is to think about what you've learned and write about it. What specifically will you take from this assignment that you can use in your own classroom? Hopefully, you have learned something about the roles of school counselors and psychologists, and so have a little bit better idea of how to work with them as a classroom teacher. What surprised you about this assignment? What would you have liked to know more about? Reflection is really thinking about your own learning. A conclusion, on the other hand, is a summary, a brief one-paragraph summary. In conclusion, I went here, I interviewed this person on this date, etc. When you're doing the interview, be sure to take lots of notes. You might want to go in with your questions prepared to match and align with the topics we just discussed. Once you are finished, go home, look at your notes, and later write up the interview as a narrative case study. Your paper should be between 3 and 4 type pages, long, double-spaced. It can be more than that. It shouldn't be a Q&A, so you shouldn't just type in your question that you ask and write their answer. Turn it into more of a narrative, story-like format so that it flows smoothly. proof your paper, and then submit it to the link on the course site in the folder. That was part 1. Part 2 is a revision of your paper, and it's worth 4% of your course grade. And as I said, it's due roughly a week later on November 1st. Part of learning is to write well is to go through a revision. So you must take your paper, review my feedback, and make the changes suggested. As you're making the changes, try to understand why you're being asked to make these changes. And then you will compose a writing reflection that is a few paragraphs long. Your writing reflection is due 1 week after your original paper is graded and returned to you. So that November 1st date isn't hard and fast. If I don't get it graded and back to you until, let's say, October 29th, then you have a week to submit part 2. What you're going to do is open up the file that was returned to you, your graded paper, and save it to your computer. You're not going to delete any of my comments or the grading rubric. Review each comment in the margin one by one. Consider why I asked you to make this revision. If it is a grammatical or writing issue, you can use the 12 little rules assignment we did previously to help you. Or just read it back and see if you can understand the change. If you don't understand something, email me and I'll be happy to make a clarification. Then make the change that was suggested. Your grade on the final assignment will be based on how well you make these revisions. Remember to highlight or place new or changed text in red. Do not delete my comments. A lot of students want to clean the paper up, but it's actually very difficult if I have to go back and find your original paper and then try to figure out what the changes that you made were. So leave all of my comments, all the grading rubrics in place, and just make the changes in red or highlight them in some way. Save your paper. Then you're going to compose your writing reflection, and we'll talk about what that consists of in a minute. It's where you think about what you have learned about the writing process and answer some questions. Then you're going to copy and paste that writing reflection to the end of your interview assignment. Save your file and submit it to the link that you saw in the folder previously for part 2. Here are 4 questions for your writing reflection. What surprised you about going through this editing process? What did you learn about writing by going through this process? What did you learn about yourself as a writer by going through this process? And what are 3 things you yourself can do as a writer to improve your writing? You can see the 2 rubrics in the instructions document. These rubrics will be used to grade your assignment. So part 1 will be graded based on how well you described the context of the interview, how well you described how they worked with students, their nature and contact with families, specific issues related to adolescents that they've developed, that they've worked with, the process they use, how they work together with other people, and your reflection. Part 2, your writing reflection and changes, will be graded based on 2 criteria: whether you made the changes that were suggested and whether you responded thoughtfully and with some detail to the writing reflection questions. That's it. Any questions? Please feel free to contact me in Heilbrenner@mercy.edu or through the course message system. Thank you, everybody.